Welcome back, everybody. Today, I present the first episode of a series dedicated to a topic that never ceases to fascinate. But before we dive in, I have a sword here that I won in a competition some time ago, in a bodybuilding competition a few years back, and this is going to be the backdrop of our series because we're going to dedicate these coming episodes to the Knights of the Temples, the Templars. Who are the Templars? Well, they are warrior monks born in the Holy Land in the aftermath of the First Crusade, and they were annihilated 2 centuries later by the King of France, Philip the Fair, in a famous and brutal political trial. This subject, as you can imagine, raises many questions. Before we begin, let's answer a few curiosities of the Templars. For example, how is it possible that Christian monks, religious men, could have a mission that involved fighting and therefore killing? How could we have this oxymoron of the killer monk? How can this exist? Well, it was possible because the era of the Crusades brought a profound transformation in the mentality of the Christian world, especially regarding its relationship with war. For a long time, Christianity remained faithful to its origins, condemning war. Throughout the High Middle Ages and the Romano-Barbaric era, even though rulers like Charlemagne waged wars in defense of faith, or at least wars presented by propaganda as being for Christianity, the clergy held firm to the idea that war was evil and that anyone who killed in battle had to do penance, even if the war was considered just. No one would have spoken of a holy war back then. Then, around the year 1000, things began to change. The decisive shift came with the First Crusade, but the seeds were sown earlier, in the 11th century, with the start of the Reconquista that actually started more or less in the 9th century, when Christian princes in Spain began reclaiming the Iberian Peninsula from the Arabs who had occupied it for centuries before, because the first invasions of the Arabs started in the year 711, and they occupied the southern portion of Spain. As you know, today the region of Andalusia was once called Al-Andalus, and it was occupied by the Arabs, who shaped the architecture and the language, also the Spanish language. How many words start with al? For example, almohada, pillow, alcachofa, and many others. So for centuries, the Arabs had a major influence on the Iberian Peninsula and Spain. And here it opened a front, the struggle against the infidels. And in the new collective mindset, a new idea began to take root that Christians had enemies, permanent enemies of both Christians and of God. And it was their destiny to fight them. On the Spanish front, the notion spread that there could be a war not only just, but a holy war, and that fighting in such a war was glorious. Those who died in that war were martyrs, but martyrs who were expected to take as many of God's enemies and with them as possible. This ideology was inspired from works like the songs of Roland, La Chanson de Roland. It was one of the first great pieces of literature called Chanson de Geste, written even before the First Crusade. In it, Roland, the hero, is facing the enemies at Roncesvalles, and he tells his men, "Here we shall suffer martyrdom, strike lords with gleaming swords," meaning you are martyrs if you die, but also if you kill, because martyr means witnessing the faith and the Christian knight bears witness with sword in hand. At this point, we understand how it became possible that after the First Crusade, a group of knights who were essentially volunteers in the Holy Land chose to serve not by assisting pilgrims of caring for the sick, but in the most effective way they knew, by fighting. They felt it as a vow by fighting. They felt it as a consecration of their lives to battle for the Holy Land. They asked to be recognized as a religious order. Yet not everyone embraced this new idea that killing could be virtuous. There was resistance, of course. The notion of creating an order of Christian monks whose mission was to fight and to kill, essentially to be killers, shocked many, until a heavyweight entered the scene, one of the greatest intellectuals of the age, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who supported the idea and wrote a treatise in praise of the new knighthood. In it, he argued that the violence of knights had been evil when it caused disorder, suffering, and death within Christendom. But now that the Templars aimed it against the enemies of God, they deserved full support. For Bernard, the Templar was a witness of the faith, a martyr. He wrote, "He kills serenely and dies serenely." As you can see, despite initial resistance, Christendom was swept away by this new conviction, and its true mission was to oppose the Muslim world by every means necessary. In this struggle, the Templars would become the major protagonists in the holy wars to come. The Knights Templars are a warrior brotherhood born in the heart of the Middle Ages and suddenly extinguished after 2 centuries. Of these men who left an indelible mark on history, only the legend remains. Their white mantles emblazoned with the unmistakable Crimson Cross, their fabulous wealth, their discipline, and their ferocity in battle. By the end of the 12th century, the Templars were an international organization. They were elite troops, the special forces of their time. And thousands of years later, mystery still shrouds the story of the soldiers of Christ. So, were they priests, monks? Were they knights? What were they? One chronicler, I always find difficult to pronounce this word. A chronicler calls them a kind of new monster who founded the order of the Knights Templar. What was their mission? And how did they become so powerful so quickly? This legendary order had a unique vocation, men who were both monks and soldiers, a singular case within a religious rule that also contained a military code. For many Christian theologians, the fusion of prayer and art in the art of war was an aberration, was something that didn't make sense. But from the arid expanses of the Middle East to the courts of the kings of France and England, here begins the rise of the first Templars. Soon, popes, kings, and all of the Christendom embraced their cause. They began receiving vast sums of money and generous donations. In the regions of Champagne, Burgundy, and Ile-de-France, Templar monasteries and agricultural estates multiplied, one every 30 to 40 kilometers. No one had ever amassed such power in so little time. This is a story of the origins of the Knights Templar, of a handful of fighters who elevated the spirits of brotherhood into a religious role, founding an order destined to dominate Europe. So this is the beginning of our journey with the Knights Templar. So stick around for the following episodes. There is so much good information, and actually I learned so much from these historical events that I'm so excited to share it with you. I will see you next time for episode 2 of this new series. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.